Hi there. If you own a 2022 and up Evolution Kart D5 series and have been looking for a way to interface with the software so you can communicate with and diagnose things using a USB cable, this video outlines the details on how to create that cable using readily available parts at home. The disclaimer here is that this information is for educational purposes only. Just because this worked for me doesn't mean it will work for you. Maybe not all carts are the same. Makes and models and controller settings might be different around the world. Please understand that interfacing with anything inside the cart you do at your own risk. You can void your warranty, permanently brick the cart. What I am showing you is what worked for me and the principles of engineering behind it, the communication going on in the cable, and how it works. The reason some people want a USB tuning cable is you're able to do a lot of different things with the dealer-based software. You can check diagnostic codes, try to debug different sensors, and you can tweak the ride settings to different limits that may be specific for you. Your dealer may be willing to do a lot of these services for you, or they may not. You may also be somewhere in a remote location. The other thing, as we've discussed, you can do with this is void your warranty and potentially brick your cart, so please be careful. When I started hunting for a cable for my Evolution cart, I came across all of these really expensive cables, and many were out of stock or took forever to get. This one here even had really bad reviews that said it broke somebody's laptop because it sent too much voltage to their USB port. So what was weird is when I did acquire one of these cables and plugged it in, it popped up on my PC as a cheap CH340 USB to serial chip. This is a really old USB to serial chip, and it costs about 50 cents. And so when I plugged it in, I realized this really wasn't a special cable at all. It was just a USB to serial cable with a special end on it for the Evolution cart. Now, in this cart, we are actually using a form of communication called RS232. So it's not the lowest form of serial to USB, which would be TTL like we use in Arduinos. It's a slightly higher voltage version called RS232. This type of communication dates back to the 1960s. If you had an old printer cable laying around, that was probably an RS232 cable. It transmits data 1 bit at a time, and typically there's 3 wires going on in there: a transmit, a receive, and a ground. So you think of serial communication kind of like a telephone, how one side talks and one side receives, and the other is a ground wire. The two systems, both when hooked up correctly, can talk and receive to each other. Typically these days they communicate with a principle like UART, and that's also very familiar to what we might see when we are coding with Arduinos and other things like that. So to make something like this, the first thing you need that I recommend buying is this exact WaveShare USB to serial adapter. This is a high quality adapter that uses the FTDI chip, a much more reliable and robust chip when you're communicating with different enterprise style devices. The last thing you want when you're reading and writing to a controller is to have the cheapest chip and drop a couple bits while you're reading and writing. So get a high quality USB device here, like this WaveShare USB to serial. It's designed to handle those higher voltages that we see with RS232, so you don't blow up your USB port like somebody else said. The drivers are automatically installed on most PCs when you plug it in. This one I really like because it has this easy to wire screw block, so if you don't have to solder anything, you can just tighten the pins down, the wires down inside that block. It includes a flat screwdriver and a USB extension cable so you can actually reach your cart. These are readily available on Amazon, and so definitely click the exact link in my description to get it, because then you know you have the exact same one. You can use it on different projects in the future because it will also do 485 and some other things. So it's a really good tool to have in your toolkit if you're working on electronics in any capacity. So when we looked at the other side, so what is going on the other side of it? So we have the USB side covered, but what is going on the golf cart? When we look at the Evolution D5 wiring diagram, you can see pins 16, 19, 13, and 18 are called the controller programming port, and it's located on the same lead as the CAN port. So when I went on my cart to that, I was able to find it located, tucked kind of closely behind the controller. And you can see what it looks like here on this photo. So inside of this, we have 4 pins. And what I discovered was that pin 19 here with the blue and white wire is the cart TX, and pin 18 is the cart RX, and pin 13 is our ground. So if we wanted to connect serial, those are the 3 pins that we need. And all we have to do is line them up. So the other thing I noticed about this port, or this plastic connector here attached to the Evolution golf cart, is it is really just an ATX 4-pin power plug. So if you've ever built a PC before, you may recognize that pin, and these are also readily available in a rather inexpensive way. So by using this combined with our WaveShare USB-C to serial adapter, connecting 3 wires in the right way, you now have a high quality Evolution diagnostic cable. I'm going to walk you through the steps in a video right now on how to assemble this cable. Okay, so now that you know what's going on, I have all the 3 things that you'll need to make your own DIY Evolution cart USB cable. We'll start with making the cable, then I'll show you how it works in the software. So the reason I like this is obviously it comes with a USB extension cord, which gets you a bit of length to get out to the cart. You have the USB to serial adapter, and they even include a small screwdriver for you, which is helpful. So let's open this and I'll show you what's going on this adapter. So the WaveShare adapter is great because it has some terminal ends on it. You don't need to solder. We can just use the small screwdriver to stick the right wires in there, and we're good to go. This can unplug. So while we're doing the wiring, we can unplug it, and then when we're done, we will stick it back in. So let's pull this out for now. One thing to note on these terminal adapters is on the back, often they ship with them fully closed. So if you look at the back and you don't see kind of a U slot, what's going on there is it has shipped closed. So I'm going to undo it, and as I'm undoing it, see how you can see the area, the square open for us. We're going to try to stick our wire up to the top. So if you're trying to get your wires to stick in there, first make sure you go counterclockwise to open these slots. So I'm just going to go counterclockwise on this one, and you can see as I'm screwing it out, the area opens where when I put the cable in and tighten it back up, it will be pinched. So some people get a little bit confused by that because they're trying to pinch the wire while it's already closed. Okay, so those are open. Now all 3 are open, and they will be ready to accept our wires. Okay, so then we get the ATX cable. These are standard ATX cable. If you've ever built a PC or something like that, these often supply power to the CPU or the fan, generally rated for 12 volts and 5 volts. Our controller communicates at about 9 volts, so that should be no problem. The end we want to use is this end here. I actually call this the male end, even though it the female end, because it receives the pins, even though it looks like the male end. So it's a bit strange, but this is the one we want, the one with the hook on the top and the 4 long pins. On our cart, it looks like this. So this is the side that is on our cart, and this is the side we're going to use here for our controller USB cable. So generally what I like to do is you go all the way down to this end, and we will use our wire cutters, the only tool you really need. We are simply going to cut off this backside. Okay, so that gives us a couple inches of cables to play with, and we will strip the wire out on these. Now, on this cable that we are about to build, one of the cables is not actually used. So when we're looking at it from the back here with the cables coming out, the top left cable is not used in this situation. So what I'm gonna do here is I am just gonna cut it short so we remember that this one is not actually used. If you have a pin tool, I'll show you how you can pull that pin out cleanly in the future, but generally for us, we are going to use these 3 cables here. So the next step is to simply strip the wires back a little bit. You don't have to go too far on these adapters, really only a couple millimeters. So I'm gonna strip that. Okay. Give it a little twist so no wires fray away on you. But that is about all you really need for exposure on the ends of these wires. Okay. All right. So our next step is we are going to look at the terminal block and the yellow wire from the very top here. Perfect. So we're going to take the yellow wire from the top right when looking at the back side. That is going to end up going in to, when we're looking at ours backwards with the screws on the top, into the far left. So I'm going to stick that in and we're going to go above the adapter there, above the little metal piece. And I am going to tighten this down. Not too hard, they're little screws with little screwdrivers. So pull on it and make sure it doesn't come out easily. But okay, so we've taken our only yellow wire from the top and we go to the screw block's far left if we're looking at it from the back. This wire here, which is the bottom right, and this bottom right is going to go to the middle wire on our terminal block. And so we're again going to make sure it goes above, and we are going to tighten this down. Okay, the last wire, the bottom left from our ATX pin, is going to go to the only remaining hole we got left, which is the far right. Up and above, tighten that down. Okay, perfect. So we can tug on that a little bit and we have now made essentially your adapter cable so that the WaveShare USB to serial device, when this plugs in, we can see here we have our ground wire, transaction, and receive. So this is all we really need to talk to our golf cart. Okay, one last call out before you plug this into your computer is typically on the top of this adapter, you can see because it's capable of doing both RS485 and RS232, there's a little toggle switch at the top. And you're gonna wanna make sure, mine came switched with it pushed to the right, but yeah, that would be RS232. So you're gonna wanna make sure that toggle switch is over to the right. For other projects, maybe you might use RS485 in the future, but for this and working with our Evolution cart, we're gonna make sure that that is on RS232. On the bottom, we have NC or 120, and we're gonna make sure that that is to the left on NC. That should be the way it comes out of the packaging, but I just wanted to point that out, that it needs to be over on RS232 at the top and on the bottom over to the left. The last thing I'm going to call out is maybe you saw my wiring diagram from the slides, and we are looking at this RX and TX and how they ended up getting wired to the back of this. And you may say, hey, it looks like your RX is going to the TX and your TX is going to the RX. And that is correct. So you actually want that to be happening because this USB adapter's RX needs to talk to the cart's TX, and the USB adapter's TX needs to talk to the cart's RX. So if you think it's backwards, that based on the wiring diagram, that is not true. We want the RX of the USB to go to the TX of the cart and the other way around. So that is some of the reasoning to things to just double check before you plug it in. Okay, so the next step is to get out your PC. We talked a little bit of having a PC that's dedicated to your workshop. If you are downloading and installing software that is from forums and unverified sources, which you may end up doing if you want to work with the controller-specific software, I do recommend, since we don't know what's going on with that software, is using a laptop that's independent from that. So, however, when it comes to installing the drivers for these, it is usually relatively straightforward and even automatic in most cases. So what I've done is you'll take this and we're going to plug it into the USB port. Typically the first time you plug it in, don't worry about having it all wired to the cart or anything else like that. We're just going to make sure that it gets detected as a communication port on your laptop. So we plugged it in. The first time, sometimes if you wait a couple seconds, you'll hear a little badoomp badoomp on Windows, which will show that it's getting the software or installing itself. I'm gonna go to search for a second, and we are going to go to Device Manager. Type in Device Manager. Mine pops up because I have gone there. So Device Manager is where you're gonna go. And what you want to see is this thing called Ports and COM. And there's a little caret here that if you click, you'll be able to see here, it's detected USB serial port COM7. And so what that means is your computer has a serial communications port, and that is this device here. If I pull it out, you'll see that it actually disappears. We will no longer have that COM port anymore, and it is gone. So let me just see here. Yeah, so we no longer have a COM port. So the main thing you want to make sure is that when you're plugging in your serial adapter, inside Device Manager, it's detected as a communications port, it's registering as a communications port, and then you see it here. I'm going to double click on it, and you can even see some additional details here. So you can see this one is using the FTDI chip, which is a high quality chip. It's pretty much a better one out there, and so this is all looking good. You can see the device status, the device is working properly. You can see the driver that was installed to use it, and everything should happen automatically for you. If not, you're gonna go and hunt for the Waveshare website, and they will give you a link to those FTDI drivers. It's really just a USB to serial driver, but it should happen automatically in most situations. Okay. So the next step would be to wire it into our cart. For this, we're going to need the USB extension cord because our cart cable is actually quite small. So I'm gonna plug this into the back, our cart Evolution cart specific end. We are going to plug the Waveshare adapter into the USB extension cord. And then this is gonna give us enough space to reach our cart. What I will show you now is over on the cart side. Okay, so over here on the Evolution cart, on the 2+2, you can see it's near the back in this extra little compartment. You're gonna first make sure that your cart is off. We don't want power right now while we're plugging it in to be sent to the controller. You're looking for this little harness back here. Sometimes they're a little bit tucked in and kind of far away, but they're together. We have the two. What I like to do is look for the little tab. There's a tiny little tab. There's two tabs on the side, but a tiny little tab on the top. And that shows you where our plug, this little pin, the upper pin on the hook on the top, will aim towards that top. They only go in one way, so you just have to kind of line it up and slide it in. Okay, so I have slid the connector in, and it goes to our USB to serial dongle, and then I have my USB extension cable, which will go to our laptop. When we power on the cart, these pins on top of the controller will become live. So be very careful not to drape your USB serial cable across these pins here because it can arc and kind of, you don't want to mess anything up. So make sure that your cable and your adapter is kind of running clean across the top and not intercepting with any of the pins on top of the controller here. Okay, so we now have our USB cable plugged into the laptop, and I can see in my laptop we still have this COM port listed as COM7. So that's good. Generally, that means that it's connected and everything is working okay. If you do have the Evolution software on your computer, the one I'm using here is EV48400C. I'm gonna open this software and say yes, that it can do things to my computer. Okay, once the software opens, the next step you're gonna wanna do is go to the Other tab here. You're gonna look at the serial port connection section, and you're gonna make sure you're choosing that port, COM7, that we know our serial adapter is on. These are the baud rate settings I found worked, which was 1152, none 8. So if you hit connect now, it won't work. No data will exchange because our cart isn't actually on. There's no power going to the controller at this exact point in time. So what we do need to do is hit the power button on the cart to turn on the accessories. When the accessories turn on, that little green light on the controller, you can see has turned on back there. And what that means is now we can read and write to that controller. So I'm gonna go back over here now and hit connect. And then I'm going to go back to homepage tab. And so if everything works, what you should see is a live feed of data coming from the cart. So you will be able to see the current, whether it's moving forward, moving backwards, the accelerator switch. So you should be able to now be getting readings and values. So this means both your TX and RX are working correctly and that everything in your cable is functional. If you're not getting any readings, it's possible that you have mixed up your TX, RX, and ground. So retake a look at everything and figure out what's going on there. But generally, this is a good sign if you're able to come to this page and you're seeing live outputs of voltage. So you can see there it says moving forward, and that's because the cart is actually in drive. If I come back and put this in neutral, you will see that the moving forward light has now turned off. So we're able to get live communication from the controller, and generally that means that everything worked well. So great, you just made your own USB to serial to evolution cart tuning cable. So now you can diagnose things, you can figure out your error codes, and you're able to read and write from the evolution controller. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, do let me know. We're not gonna in this video go into the tuning settings that I have found worked or other things like that. I'm gonna save that for another video. This video is designed to get you up and running. So in our next video, we will go into the diagnostic software and the different things that you can change and look at. But for this video, it was all about just getting, making a cable and getting that communication to work. So I hope that helps, and stay tuned, hit subscribe, and we will get you our next video, which dives a little bit more into the settings that you can change, some things that I've found work, some things that don't work, and we'll talk about that then. Cheers.